Hi. So I am so excited to be here, and I am so happy to talk to you about AI and data governance for large language models and for the Swedish public sector. My name is Danila Petrelli. I am a data manager at AI Sweden. And before we start, I want to tell you that I'm aware that for many working with development, data governance or data management in general is not the sexiest topic. As a matter of fact, I must say that it can become somehow of a burden talking about this kind of topics sometimes, depending on how it is implemented. While the tech is busy building something useful and quickly, I think that it is the most interesting thing in the world. Of course, I'm biased, but um, I'm also here not to offer solutions to all problems. I'm here to bring problems. So I'm excited to share my challenges with you. I will focus on two very different, actually, different words, and one that is very much relates with an application, and the other one that really deals with the foundation models that you're building, because we are doing both things right now at AI Sweden. Sweden, for who is not familiar with it, it's the National Center for Applied AI, and we are this work that you're seeing pertains to two different teams, two fantastic teams. One is the natural language understanding team that's building resources in order to be able to build national or European large language models. And the other one is the a digital assistant team. It's a team built in order to create the digital assistant for the public sector, which is something that we will talk about shortly. Now, why don't I focus just on one of them? I think it's because one of my lessons learned was that different kind of projects might need very diverging strategies when it comes to the approach to data governance or data management or even AI governance. And this needs to be very much. So giving you some of these differences is also one of my goals today, explaining one of those. Taking one step back, you might be familiar with this, but just to clarify, when we talk about AI governance in practice, we are referring to all the frameworks, the processes, the policies that underlie the way the systems are built. And the purpose is to give guidance on how these systems should be developed, deployed, and also monitored. It also helps you understand that AI systems should be compliant, ethical, secure, and set up the guardrails. To sum it up, AI systems shouldn't just work with AI governance, they should also operate safely, fairly, and transparently. And because I know that previous talk, you have also explored the AI Act. So I know you might be familiar with this, and everybody is operating within AI right now. So there are so many tools out there that can help, depending on your use case and domain, keeping this in place, and all that they really allow you to follow the data from the raw state until the very end, and so forth. Unfortunately, what the systems that I am about to show to you, I haven't really found a platform that can help in every respect. I think it's also a bit of a special use cases, I would love to talk to you about that right now. So this is why I'm not explaining clear solutions here, but I'm explaining the challenges. I will start with the large language model perspective. And I just would like, as a premise, that if somebody is asking why in Sweden we might need a national large language models when we have already solutions that are working splendidly and that we can that are built elsewhere and that might always perform better. I will say that this is needed because of competence and innovation, because we shouldn't stop building that. For transparency, representativity, also because we need to make sure that the Swedish data is properly represented in the data that these large language models are trained on, and transparency, because if then we exactly know which data that is. Resilience and sovereignty and democratization. But also I would like to stress the fact that these systems will become central to many other systems in the future, and we need to ensure that Sweden and the other European countries do not become dependent on large global commercial actors, and because we should not assume that these actors will prioritize building resources for a small language. Swedish is a medium resource language. We're not doing this on our own. We are doing this also with an eye to Europe. As a matter of fact, I'm a data manager for a very big European project called Trust LLM that wants to build the most trustworthy European AI. So this means that the project involves other countries. For all the Germanic languages, we have the Netherlands, Germany, Denmark, Norway, Iceland, the Faroe Islands, and so forth. This is because mentioning this, because the lesson learned do not specifically apply only to Sweden in this specific case, maybe in the second domain that I will explain. So, but very briefly, I will claim here that there is no AI governance without proper data governance, and that I think we should really focus on having a bottom-up approach to the problem of making systems trustworthy. So we take a neural network, and in this image you just see GPT-3 because this is what I had. You take computational models inspired by biological neural networks, and you throw data at it in order to be able to train. So you take some data. Of course, this is not enough data. Then you give it more data and much more data, and you realize that it's still not enough data. So you keep on giving it data, and I will not stress this enough. Is this enough data? I will stop because there was no space on the slide, but possibly we are talking about terabytes of data to be able to create something that really performs well, like the equivalent of over 20 million copies of Crime and Punishment only for text data would suffice to create something that works, right? So it doesn't come as a surprise that data management could be really crucial to the development of these systems, and it is the foundational layer, because it is how we manage the availability, integrity, security, and usability of the data that we feed into these AI systems. And poorly governed data leads to models that are untrustworthy and non-compliant, and this makes AI governance impossible to implement effectively. So this is what I immediately I realized that I needed to focus on when we wanted to build large language models in Europe. We needed to comply with regulations, or maybe make sure that we will reach the point in 2025, right? When in August, so we have already we need to show compliance, like in the EU AI Act. Ensure data privacy, that I'm talking about GDPR, especially with PII. This is specific to Europe. Avoid copyrighted material. We have very strict copyright laws. Avoid bias or unintended consequences. Enable transparency across the life cycle of the models. And create accountability for the outcomes, for the outputs as well. Right. This is what I really thought we would focus on, and it was true that if I really had this checklist, and I could make sure that all of that points were the boxes were ticked, then we were fine. We were good to go. But it is a challenge. So we have personal data and GDPR compliance, right? Under this, we want to make sure the data is anonymized, but we are talking about huge data sets that are really difficult to anonymize properly with no harm. Let's see it in a few seconds. No harm to the data itself, to the performance of a model. We need to guarantee the right to erasure to individuals, and that it's nearly impossible to remove specific data once you have trained the model, right? GDPR also states purpose limitation, meaning that if you build a large language model for general purposes, it's a bit hard to do so. Data minimization, these vast data sets defeat this right immediately. And transparency, we also know that that is a challenge. I'm giving you a little example in the fact that this could be two pieces of data present in your training data, and then you have a very normal individual going to the supermarket, and a piece of history with important piece of knowledge and context for the large language model that you really do not want to remove from the training data, because otherwise you might make the model useless for many uses. So you try some techniques, you try to mask the entities, or you might try to shuffling the entities, swapping them, randomize them. There are so many other things that could be done in practice. This would be ridiculous, right? If I train my large language models on data that looked consistently like this with important historical information wrong. Of course, here you need to clearly separate the concepts and the data that you want the model to retain, and blah, blah, blah. But it is not easy. Creating a threshold, even the definition of what a public character is really fluffy. And then imagine doing this on a huge training data set for a foundation model. Copyright. It is extremely dangerous to think of using training data that has copyrighted material in it. And it is still a problem when you think also of the outputs, because you might be generate copyrighted material. It is also, there is a lot of unclarity, I would say, because of the lack of a court case in Europe yet that clearly defines what we can and we cannot do. But what we know is that we need to take this issue very seriously. And I will not go in detail about all these points, but I can say that it is extremely important when it comes to this specific topic to be sure that you know where your data comes from, if it is properly documented. And for large language models, ensuring the data sets are sourced ethically and legally is a key part of governance. And this brings me to another point, that doing so by collecting the proper metadata might save your work. And that everything, the key of everything is really your metadata, and it is something that needs to happen during the collection process. It's something that you cannot do afterwards, and therefore it is necessary that it is done as properly as possible. And if you didn't have a metadata policy because you didn't know what you needed before the end, how do you fix it retroactively? You can't really. And when it comes to try to understand the copyright in web data, just so you know, we have something in Europe that is called text and data mining exception for the copyright directive, and that could potentially solve the copyright. As in, okay, so if you have a mention in in your robots.txt or in the HTTP headers or in the HTML metadata about the fact that I am the owner of this data, I don't want to use it. I want to have I don't want to mine this data. Then we might think that then we cannot use it, or then we can use it accordingly. But it is not regulated really clearly where we are going to find it. If it's going to be here, it could be anywhere in the website. Actually, it is a right of the copyright holders for someone. It needs to be found clearly here with a super standardized way of saying that, which is not the case right now. It is absolutely not. And what are we looking for exactly? Was clear reservations for AI training, or what kind of restriction? How is it going to be articulated? We don't know that. But we need to be extremely careful. And it can also change at any time. So if something can change after you've collected it. Therefore, your metadata should potentially, actually, instead of being like this super small tag that sometimes we're used to, as informative as possible. It is a difficult effort to achieve that for such a large data set, but it is the ideal world scenario. And more about metadata that could contain information regarding potential bias, risk, and limitations that are not specifically related to copyright and so forth. My takeaway regarding the large language model perspective, my biggest takeaway, and then in the end we can talk more about this, is that wrong decisions on your data specifically will prevent you from achieving a compliant model. If that is the case, you will just not be able to use it or to make it appealing to others. Let's shift dramatically to the other topic super quickly. I was really assuming when I started working for this amazing project, this is a digital assistant for the public sector, I really wanted to assume that I would use the same frame of reference in my head that I had already for the large language models problem. But it is not like that. So this is an initiative for collaboration between the Swedish authorities, municipalities, regions, and the private sector that deals with AI for text tasks. And the goal is to create the conditions for shared AI solutions for the text in public sector. And in practice, what we are building is a prototype, a system. There is a web-based conversational interface that can help the public sector and therefore inherently the citizens. So these are where the points that you've seen before, the points that pertains to the creation of a large language models. I was like, okay, let's start. I know how to do this because I know how to think of these problems. But it turns out it was completely different in this case, because all of a sudden to the EU AI Act, I had to add the very specific Swedish thing, which is the Public and Secrecy Act, which is a unique interpretation that Sweden has about confidentiality in the public sector, but also about transparency in the public sector, because AI systems in this case must not only comply with GDPR, but also with the UI Act, but they also need to become resilient to breaches and transparent enough to ensure the public trust. Additional level of complexity. And therefore, I realized that PII, I'm sorry if I haven't, it's personal identifiable information, would all of a sudden be really a crucial point in this project, even more than before. Avoid copyrighted material. This is not a headache. It does not mean that we shouldn't comply with that, but it's just not the main focus as it has been in the previous creation of datasets. It's not such a big of a problem. While the rest, I must say, still applies. But so the journey started with understanding that one of the main challenges is the lack of harmonization between legal frameworks that we need to comply to. And this is, as I was mentioning, the Swedish Public and Secrecy Act versus the GDPR. And remember, this problem arises because I'm dealing with the public sector, right? It can create confusion. And this particularly impacts the role of what is called the technical processor, because there is often a lack of clarity around what responsibilities fall to the processor, especially when it comes to ensuring that data is handled legally across these frameworks. I can give you two examples, and they are really contrasting, just to make you understand why there is lack of harmonization according to many. Well, first of all, GDPR is primarily designed to protect individuals' privacy, and it requires a lawful basis for processing and sharing personal data, but it prevents sharing personal data publicly unless certain criteria are met. And instead, under the Public and Secrecy Act, the public authorities must provide access to documents, and this must it paradoxically might require the disclosure of personal data, but you cannot disclose personal data. Therefore, you anonymize those documents, but you anonymize them sometimes in a way that the document itself might not become super easy to be understood. This is one example, but on the other hand, there is also the opposite case, where the technical processor, which is the agent that is actually processing technically the data for the controller, that is the public sector, they maybe built a system that maintains strict confidentiality. It's the system that is so restricting the access to data that it's almost impossible to guarantee, actually, under GDPR, the obligation to ensure that citizens can request the access to their data. So it is a challenge, and I think it's not super automatized yet. So as I was saying, this is a unique definition. Oh, I introduce here another concept. Then all of a sudden you need to be very aware that data separation needs to be in place, because your infrastructure might still be hosted by one service provider, but it needs to be separated from the other clients, because you need to ensure that no other organization has access to the whole. data and the whole system, depending on which data you're referring to. Municipalities are independent controllers, it's called. So you need to implement either logical separation, you need to think if you want to implement different physical segregation, encryption, and access monitoring. This is super fascinating and interesting that no developers, when building these systems, can actually have you can see interaction data in plain text. Please, among you, anybody who has been dealing with data and built anything, can you even imagine doing so without even being able to look at the data that actually the user might be producing in the chatbot? And this means that you need to spend a long time understanding how to have dedicated off-prem environments that can be offered by providers that entirely isolate organizations, unless you can afford the on-prem solutions, but that comes with limits. We'll be very quick here. Public sector takeaway. In this case, instead, I think I learned that it's essential to do a careful planning that involves constant collaboration from the start between the technical teams, the legal experts, and public stakeholders. And I must say, I realize how important it is to build competences in the field of legal tech and having these bridges and experts. I feel very blessed because we do have extremely knowledgeable lawyers when it comes to tech in my organization, but so many more resources are needed for this to go quicker and smooth. This is global lesson learned from these two projects and more. To be honest, I want to say that building AI governance framework will mean data work in the end, and therefore that's why I love to talk about data governance in the first place. There you need to have some kind of strong policy from the start, because some things are really hard to undo or do retroactively, But also don't assume that something that we aren't able to do or we weren't able to do a couple of years ago is not possible now. Actually, both on the law side, because new interpretation and maybe a less conservative approach could always pop up. And on the tech side, let's say inference attacks becoming better and better. Of course, now we know much better about anonymization techniques and the ones that work and the ones that don't work. So, and also the different governance framework might be needed for different use cases. These are completely different domains, although they rely both on foundation model existing maybe data. And but I don't want to be rhetorical here. When I say this, I really mean it. The boring part about referring to AI governance and data governance must be because you really think that you can just check boxes, or they would be so easy and practical. But I also would love to say that that's not the whole point at all. And it's about building systems that we can trust. Wow, it took 30 minutes exactly as I planned, and now this is not moving forward with. Oh yeah, it is. My presentation is actually over.
Thanks everyone for being here for the first Data Science Friday of 2025. We're going to post new information about the next DSF very soon. So looking forward to seeing you next time. And thanks again, Danila. We'll speak a little bit later.
Thank you very much, everybody.